My name is Patton, and with me today is Angie Pfannkuck. Did I get that right?
Pfannkuck.
I'm so sorry. All right, we're going to talk to you today about construction manager at risk. We're also going to probably do a what I would call kind of a review of the different delivery systems that are available to municipalities in Iowa, really to just give you a strong flavor of what's available and really give you a better idea that if we can compare and contrast the different delivery systems, that'll give you as a municipality a better understanding of how these things might work. So we've gone through the introductions. We're going to talk about the 3 delivery models that are available to you as a municipality. We're going to hone in specifically on the benefits of the construction manager at risk model, and then we're going to open it up for some questions. And as Daniel mentioned, if you've got questions during the presentation, please enter them in the chat room so that you don't forget them. We will circle back and answer those at the end of the presentation. So as I mentioned, there are 3 project delivery systems that are available to municipalities in Iowa. We've got 4 listed there. We did include design build. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. The traditional design bid build is what I think all municipalities are familiar with. That is the delivery method that was available to you for several years. It's what we all kind of grew up on. It's what we all know. Design build is another delivery system. A lot of times when folks start to talk about alternative project delivery systems, they just call it design build, right? They lump it underneath this catch-all phrase. But in actuality, design build is a very specific way of delivering a project from start to finish. It is not available to municipalities in Iowa because of Iowa's public bid laws. So while it's listed here, and sometimes you hear that term, that's not something that is available to you. However, there are 2 other delivery models that are available to municipalities. First one being construction manager agency, and we'll talk about what that means here in just a little bit. Then also we'll talk about construction manager at risk, which is the new delivery model that was just authorized this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, the design bid build. So this is, again, like I said, this is the delivery model that we're all familiar with. The owner hires the design professional to design a project. The designer goes about their work, develops the construction documents that are able to then be publicly bid. The owner or the design professional administers that bid, and eventually that results in an award recommendation to the lowest and responsive general contractor. At that point, the owner contracts with that general contractor to be the builder of the project. Throughout that phase, there is communication that happens between the owner and the designer, but to protect the integrity of the bid, I guess is a good way of saying that. Usually contractors aren't allowed to view the construction documents or to provide input during the design phase. Again, we don't want to give a contractor an unfair advantage to another one by allowing them to have input on the design. Again, we do one big, large bid package. And so, really today we're going to talk a lot about probably vertical projects. So those are going to be projects that are building related. They might be your city halls, your fire stations, your park shelters, things like that. This does, I'm sorry. So again, like I said, we're going to be talking about the vertical side. You can apply some of these to the horizontal elements, except for there's a few specific instances that we'll get into where you can't use construction manager for horizontal projects. So we'll talk about that. But really, when we talk about a vertical project, we talk about all of the bid packages for that vertical project when it's design, build are available at the same time. So foundations, the structures, the exterior, all of these things are going to be included in that single bid package up front when it's the design, bid, build. Again, as we talked about, the contractor with the lowest responsible bid is selected to do the project. And then as change orders happen during the project, you get a lump sum price or unit bid price, depending upon how that is. But again, the change orders are a process that happens between the builder and the owner. Talking about that looking at from a scheduling point of view, again, the first step is the owner hires a design professional. They put their heads down, get the design developed, create construction documents that are then bid. You have a bidding process that is defined by public law. The owner then awards the project, and once that project is awarded, that's when you know what that price is going to be for that project. Now, you're going to have engineer estimates up to that point, but like we'll talk about here in a minute, on the engineering side, we're really looking at historical data. So I don't know about any of the other professional firms that are on this call today, but we have certainly struggled to kind of catch up to the industry here during the pandemic in terms of trying to make sure that our construction prices are accurately reflecting what is happening in the industry. And it's been a real challenge to be able to get a construction estimate that is going to be accurate, especially when we're talking about a project that we may take 6 months to design. It's really hard to set a price and then have that price be accurate the day that the bid opens. And then finally, once we get through that bidding process, that's when the general contractor comes on board and builds the project. So that's really kind of the traditional method. I'm gonna allow Angie to talk a little bit about construction management. We're gonna start first with agency, and so Angie, please feel free to take it away.
Okay. I do have just a couple comments on the design, bid, build, which I wasn't supposed to comment on. But
no, go for it.
So in this process, you're really in a silo during design. You're not getting market input at all as far as like what materials are available, what materials might be 8 months out. And if you make a change, they could be 3 months out. So the design, bid, build, which is what the state of Iowa has always had, really makes it a little bit more challenging to figure out if what is in the drawings is actually constructible, if it's feasible to be doing, especially in this market right now where we know everything has long lead times and pricing is just crazy. So it is a good process, but it isn't as fluid as some of these other options that we're going to talk about today. So on to the CM as agency. This is one that we have been using in the state of Iowa, and I think it is a little bit scarier to cities than a normal design, bid, build. But when I am an owner's rep for a city, I push for a CM. So this is an add-on to the traditional design bid system. The owner still hires the design firm, and then normally at that time or before that time, if the owner has chosen to have an owner's rep, they bring them on at that time as well. And then the owner's rep and the design firm help choose the CM. And so the CM process is just an RFQ, RFP that goes out. We normally ask for qualifications, team, fees, similar projects, all of that sort of thing. But the benefit of a CM is that you can bring them on early in the process. So you can bring them on at the same time as the design team shortly after, and then they're with you throughout the entire process. So you have an extra seat at the table of someone who understands constructability. They understand what the market's doing. They are an additional advisor to the owner. So it's a separate contract. They're a professional service, just like I'm a professional service and the architect is a professional service. So they have no contractual relationship with the designer or the contractor. But what they do is sit during the process and help manage expectations, I guess. And then they also are able to give a little bit more real life pricing as the drawings are being designed and a little bit more input on what's happening in the market. So they monitor the schedule and the budget, but they do not guarantee the cost of the project. So in a CM as agency structure, the owner, which would be the municipality, still holds the contracts for all of the prime contractors. So City of Clive, as an example, we had 10 to 12 prime contracts underneath the CM. So CM prepares the pay app every week, every month, but the city is the one writing all the checks, verifying pay applications along with myself and a CM. So I think that's it.
Yeah, so Angie, on this model, so we've talked about design bid build where the owner has two contracts.
Mhm.
Contract with the design professional and then a contract with the contractor. Construction management adds another contract, does it? Does it not?
It adds many more contracts.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So the owner would have to manage the contract with the designer, also manage the contract with the construction manager. Then also, if you do a general contractor, you would have one on the construction side, one contract to build the project. Or you may want to do different bid packages where you would end up with multiple contractors. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep. And in a lot of the CM as agency situations that I've been in, we do multiple prime contractors instead of one GC.
Is
So-
there an advantage for the city to look at breaking it out into bid packages versus having one general contractor to handle that?
Yeah, it depends on what's going on in the market, but a lot of times there is a benefit just with people's workloads and how attractive a one single bid package for concrete and steel could be versus lumping everything together and throwing windows and roofing and everything in there. So yeah, it's just kind of a market test really.
Sure.
And honestly, we have seen with multiple prime contracts, you get better pricing potentially too. So
Good deal.
just another thing in there. So the CM does manage all the primes. So they are on site every day. They are managing the construction process. They're just not the GC, and there's more contracts, but they are the ones managing the day-to-day work and the schedule. So it is as if you had a GC, but it's a construction manager, and they are in charge of all of the primes, even though they don't hold the prime contracts.
That's, yes, yeah. So they are out there doing construction administration, so to speak. So they are watching the work of the contractor, managing to a degree, they're managing the work of the contractor, making sure that the contractor is getting things scheduled appropriately, that the project is going smooth. And then when issues arise, the construction manager is there to get that conversation started about how are we going to resolve this issue.
Correct. Yep. They coordinate all work among the primes, and then they also run the weekly or bi-weekly contractor meetings.
Awesome. Let's look at construction management in terms of schedule. So as Angie had mentioned, the first step could be that the owner hires the owner's rep or the construction manager. They may want to hire the design professional first. It doesn't really matter which one happens, but it's really like the way that you had described it. Design bid build is you're hiring one person, and then you're hiring somebody else to do the building. But with construction management, either an agency or at risk, what that does is it creates a project team up front. Is really what it does, because now you're allowing that construction manager that has that construction industry knowledge to be a part of that team early on. So again, like a traditional project, the design happens, right? We need to know what we're building. We need to be able to develop the documentation that a contractor is going to need to be able to get the project done. Where this starts to deviate is that, again, like Angie said, we can have multiple bid packages in this case. So, we may do a foundation bid package, we may do a site features bid package, so on and so forth. But we can start issuing those bid packages earlier in the project so that we can get the underground work done while the architect is still finishing up the building package, so to speak. So those bid packages get issued. construction starts. So it allows this to kind of condense the overall cycle of a project just a little bit, because we can start overlapping phases here. As Angie mentioned, the construction price, again, isn't determined until all the bid packages have been released and awarded. Quick note on those bid packages, you're still going to be following Iowa public bid law. So they will be the traditional bidding process where you have advertise and then accept bids and then award it to the lowest bidder. Let's talk about the new opportunity here that municipalities have now. Let's talk about construction manager at risk.
Okay. So with SF 183, I think everybody on this call knows it was a long time coming and quite the process to get there, but thankfully it is a new method that we have and one that we should be trying to figure out and try on some of the current projects that are floating around out in the municipalities. The difference with CM at risk or CMAR is they are both the advisor and the contractor. So they advise the owner during the design phase and then the general contractor during the construction phase. And in big terms, what that means is they get to a GMP. We still have to follow public bid laws. So we would still bid out packages as we see fit, whether that's one big one or again, multiple primes, which I do think most people do multiple primes under this too. But they manage all of that. So it is their risk. It's their contractual relationship with the contractors and suppliers. It's their risk for going over the budget that they have set up. They have full responsibility for construction labor, materials, equipment, and execution. So much like the CM agency, CM at risk, basically the ad is they hold the contract with all of the primes rather than the city or the municipality holding the contract with all the primes. So in this model, the owner really holds a designer contract and they hold the CMAR contract, and that's it. And then the CMAR holds all of the multiple prime contracts and is responsible. So in this as well, it's similar to CM as agency. You know, they're on site day to day, they manage all the subs, they hold the construction meetings. Coming from my side of things, this gives the CM more control than agency does, which is then better for the municipalities, because since the CM holds the contracts, they can put more pressure on the primes than what the other model is where the city is holding the contract. So since it is their direct contractual responsibility with the primes, it's a little easier to push if there becomes an issue. So schedule on this, you know, they should be able to drive schedule, price, all of those things, just like we want them to do. So under this, the CM can self-perform work too.
Correct.
And that is different on agencies. So they are able to self-perform here. There's rules that they have to follow, which are all laid out in SF 183. So there are rules they have to follow, and they do have to go get competitive bids, and it still has to go to a low bidder, but they are able to at least propose on the self-perform work, which a lot of CMs in the state of Iowa do have self-perform, whether that's concrete, trim work, those sorts of things. There are a lot that can self-perform, which can help with your schedule too. So I just feel like there's more control in the schedule and the process with CM at risk. You know, there's an opportunity to bring them on early too, same time or around the time as the designer. So there is a whole process that has to be followed with notification periods and all that. We're not getting into that today. That is all in the bill and you guys can read all that. But, and if you have a city attorney, they can go through all that with you, or if you have an owner's rep, they can help you with that, but that could take us 30 minutes to go through. So there are, with any public bid, there are notification processes, and with the CM at risk, there's a qualifications process, an RFP process, an award process to get the CM on, and then you follow similar steps to bring on the primes. And again, everything is still state of Iowa law, so those primes are still qualified low bid, but you are able to add in some qualifications in this process that you can't in the CMS agency. So
Angie, let me ask a few questions here. So one of the things that you mentioned was GMP, so guaranteed maximum price. What does that mean specifically for municipalities?
So for the municipalities, what that would mean is if the CM says it is $15 million that is what the project cost is unless there would be owner-driven changes. So, and in that $15 million, there's probably some contingency that can be used back and forth, but the owner doesn't have to worry about crazy conditions that they weren't aware of, prices of steel going up 60% in 3 weeks, like has happened. So they don't have to worry about those sorts of things. So it should give the cities a comfort that if they have their councils pass a $15 million project, it should be a $15 million project unless there's significant changes brought on by the city. You know, if they get a new police chief or a new fire chief or public works director and something changes, obviously that's not covered under there, but any other things should be within that GMP.
Right, so when you're setting that GMP, that gets set up front, doesn't it?
I can get set in a couple different places. That's kind of the gray area we're all still trying to find. So it can get set at like design development documents. It can get set as soon or as late, from what I understand, as you feel comfortable.
Correct. So, yeah, I think from a design professional's point of view and from our past experience, usually it makes sense to set that guaranteed price probably about 60% of the way in. Mm-hmm. That's where, you know, the majority of the building envelope has been designed. We know where things are going to go. We know what the site conditions and the utilities that are all going to need to be there. We just don't have the construction documents, the actual instructions created yet. Mm-hmm. So, but it does give you a good sense from a contractor's perspective, gives you a very good sense of what that work's going to be, and it allows you to price it accordingly. So construction manager is going to guarantee that price. So if they say it's a $15 million city hall facility, mm-hmm. that's what the ultimate price is going to be, provided there are no changes. But from a construction manager's point of view, how do they manage that risk? Because as we all know, things change, prices change. You know, you don't know what your prime contractors are going to be until you publicly bid that. How does this work for a CM? Why is this advantageous for them?
So I do think that is what the CMs are trying to figure out at this point, right? Because we've been doing agency forever, mm-hmm. and the risk isn't on them.
Right.
But they do, from the CMs I've talked to, and I've talked to 5 or 6 of them throughout this last year of trying to get to this point, they do feel like they can still build a better team, mm-hmm. under SF 183 than as agency. Okay. So they're trying to figure out how to be comfortable enough, or what that delta of being comfortable is. So yeah. I think, quite honestly, in a lot of these circumstances, we're just going to have to get through 3 or 5 of them, mm-hmm. and see that they work okay, and get comfortable, because it is something new, but it's something needed. It's just we have to figure out how to navigate it all. So yeah, I think, you know, because they can also send out qualifications to the prime contractors, which currently you cannot do, or right. Up until July 1st, you could not do. So I do think they're getting there. They're getting comfortable. I know 3 CMs that right now have similar presentations out that they're out marketing to schools and hospitals and, you know, cities too, about why cities should do CM at risk. So they are getting more comfortable.
Yeah. Let's maybe talk, let's get specific here. So let's say we are doing a city hall facility, mm-hmm. and we get to the fun part where it's the fixtures and finishes, right? Mm-hmm. So we're now, as a city, we're deciding, okay, what kind of furniture do we want? What's it look like? You've already set your guaranteed price, you know, so you probably said, okay, we're gonna do a $50,000 or $100,000 allowance for furniture, mm-hmm. right? And now you're going to bring examples, right? You're going to say, okay, within this budget that we've all agreed to up front and said this is going to be the allowance, you know, these are your options, right? And so as a construction manager, how would you handle a situation where, well, let me see, I'll try to phrase this appropriately. Let's say, for instance, we have a budget set, but the furniture that we really like doesn't meet that budget. How do you handle that situation?
So there's a couple different ways, but I do think that would be an owner change. So it'd just be an owner change order direct to to the CM
Mhm.
at risk potentially. The other thing is, in projects that I am involved in, I have the owner carry the furniture and just the CM carry the making sure there's data, power, and all of that sort of thing. So I have them coordinate
Okay,
and carry the power sources and all that, but I don't have them carry the furniture vendor.
sure.
And so I think there's a couple different ways, but if the CM does carry the furniture vendor and the
Yeah.
owner changes their mind, to me, that's an owner-driven change. And the
Yeah.
contract would have to be amended with a change order based on that.
So let's talk about the other side of that coin. Let's say, for instance, we pick furniture and we get our bids back and it comes in less than the budget. What do we do with that remaining dollars? I know it's,
Yeah,
maybe it's an unfair question to you, but I'm gonna ask anyway.
yeah, no, I've also been having discussions with CMs about that. So in this model, getting to a GMP, there is a chance that you would have cost savings.
Mhm.
Just based on some things that changed during the project. And so the people I've been talking to were wondering if you cost share those savings, if they all go back to the city, what that looks like. So I think that's a discussion that each city and each CM would have to have, but there is a potential for savings within this GMP contract. And in the past, in a process we can't use anymore in the state of Iowa, those savings went back to the municipality. But I do think it's an open discussion.
Yeah, I think what we have seen in other states, and certainly on the private side too, is now becomes a conversation between the construction manager and the city
Mhm.
in terms of when we have cost savings, how are we going to share that? Recognizing that the construction manager is assuming risk on this
Mhm.
project, and that risk does need to be rewarded.
Right, right, and that just creates a team atmosphere too, which is what I think we're trying to do with this as well, with SF 183,
Yeah.
is create a better process, a better way to get public projects done. And that better way is to create a team where people feel like they're accountable to each other and want the best outcome, you know, and have been in the process the entire time, rather than just getting a set of documents after somebody else has been working on them for 10 months and then trying to build what's in those documents.
Right. Yeah, I think from my perspective as, you know, working on the design side, it is always better to have contractors come in early and offer some feedback early on about what would work, what won't work. If you phase it this way, it's going to be twice as expensive to build. So here's a better way of going about it. You know, that team approach does have value to the owner. It is going to reduce construction costs.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about project delivery. The largest cost of a project is going to be the actual construction cost.
Right, right.
Let's look at, well, actually, one more thing I wanted to clarify. So we talked about design, bid, build, having two contracts, right?
Mhm.
A contract with the design professional, a contract with the contractor. Construction manager agency becomes at least 3 contracts, if not more, that the owner would have to hold. Construction manager at risk is back to the 2 contract model. Again, they're contracting with the design professional when they're contracting with the construction manager. And at that point, the construction manager would then administer bids. Public Iowa bid law again requires that the prime contractors underneath the construction manager, all of those contracts have to be publicly bid in accordance with state law. And then you're selecting the lowest responsible bidder at that point, but the owner doesn't have to enter into a contract with the them. So maybe one more question now that I think about it from a municipal point of view. On the design bid build side, contractors provide bonds, and they provide, you know, not only the performance bonds during the project if something was to happen, they weren't able to complete the project. The city has the assurance that there is a company that's going to step in and finalize it. But they also have maintenance bonds that says, you know, hey, we're going to have a 1-year bond or a 4-year bond that requires the general contractor to come back and address any deficiencies in the work that may not be immediately noticeable at the end of the project. How does that work when it's construction manager and the city doesn't have that contract with the general contractor anymore?
So they would just have to specify in their RFQ, RFP that they do want bid bonds.
Okay,
And so it would be the same. Most construction managers can get bonding, can
okay,
get maintenance bonds, all of that. So on some projects I've done, we have required bonding, on some we haven't. You know, it is a direct cost to the owner.
mhm,
And so it's kind of how comfortable you are and what your city attorney and everybody is comfortable with doing. So it
Sure.
would just have to be advertised at the time that it's sent out, that bid bonds are required. And then, you know, if you want maintenance bonds, specify that as well.
So would that be, if we had the multiple prime contractors that the construction manager is managing?
Mhm.
Would those bonds go, so would the city end up with, you know, 6 or 7 different bonds, or would it just be one bond with the construction manager?
Just one bond with the construction manager.
Excellent. Let's talk about schedule real quick. So again, much like construction manager agency, there's some overlap. This allows this project to be delivered in a compressed schedule. Again, owner hires design professional, owner hires construction manager. And again, we've talked about when does that guaranteed max price get set? Could be set early on. It could be set a little bit later once we have a better feel of what the scope of the project is going to be.
Mhm.
I think that any project, you know, we can have that conversation of when does that make sense to set that price. If it is a park structure, something that's
Right.
pretty simple, that could probably be set early on. But if it is say a joint city hall law enforcement center,
Mhm.
where there is a lot of moving pieces with that, and that may be something that we would want to wait until the design is a little further developed before we set that
Mhm.
guaranteed price.
Yep.
Like construction manager agency, you know, there will be multiple bid packages on this. Again, construction manager will decide what they want to issue in terms of bid packages and how they want to combine the work and maybe separate the work. Maybe you want to do foundation concrete different
Mhm.
from site concrete. Those are going to be different contractors with different skills and experience. So it doesn't make sense to have just one concrete contract.
Right.
And again, like construction manager agency, once those bid packages have been issued and awarded, construction can begin early. So again, we can start getting the utility and the site work and the foundation work done while the building is still being finalized.
Yep.
So key advantages, we've talked quite a bit about it, but I think it would be really good to just, you know, summarize and hit on these really hard.
Okay, yeah. So the first one to me that's most important is the team approach to design. So what you're getting with adding a CM at risk is you're bringing someone to the table very, very early on in the process. A lot of times when the city decides they have a project, you know, then you can start that formal RFQ, RFP process to bring someone on. But by doing that, you guys, everybody can look at value engineering during the design process, which is a lot easier to do during design rather than when you've already taken something to council and then have to walk it back by $5 million or whatever that number is. The CM also looks at means and methods to make sure whatever is in the drawings is actually constructible. And that happens whether you're the best architect in the world and the best engineer in the world. There's just some things that when you get onto the site actually don't work the way they should on the drawing. And so by looking at means and methods and clash detection during the design process, you save a lot of errors or possible changes in the field. And from my perspective, you can save the most money during design. You can't save money once you're going vertical. And so all those decisions and having a team to make those decisions with help save money in the long run. So, which kind of goes into the next one, which is the ability to make informed decisions. So with a CM at risk, they will actually go out to the market and ask questions. And it's not harming any Iowa bid laws, anything like that. It's more like, hey, I have a 30,000 square foot building. How much is precast these days? It's discussions like that. It's not, I'm building a new city hall and I want you on it, give me a price. It's just doing a gut check in the market. It's also checking with suppliers to say, is steel still 8 weeks out or is it 30 weeks? I know switchgear right now is 60 weeks. And that might not be something an architect knows, you know? And so it's just getting a real-time check in the market and real costing in the market so you can make informed decisions. We know we can't order tile from Italy right now because you'll never get it. And so it's having that day-to-day conversation because they're around others in the market and have those allies around that they can ask questions of. So that helps with informed decisions, but also gets you to a good GMP. So you want a true GMP. You don't want one that might, is too low just to move forward or anything like that. You don't want one that has too much contingency in it, especially if you're not going to share in the cost savings. So it is a good way to get to a locked-in GMP that is a realistic GMP. Also, it's good that you can have hard discussions in a room as a team, rather than having those hard discussions when you're out in the field in construction. So there's a lot of unpleasant discussions happening right now just because of price and schedule and availability of everything. And it's good when you have allies in the room to talk through those things and you have a good knowledge of the market. So everybody knows that what is being said is what's happening all over. So knowledge of the market also pertains to when to bid. We really relied on this for the city of Clive and got really good pricing because of it. Everybody used to think you wanted to bid in the fall because you'd get the best pricing. And then it was bid in the spring because whatever. I don't think there's really a tried and true method to it. It is truly year by year, quarter by quarter. And in Iowa, with all of our data centers and large projects, it is a real issue with labor. And so knowing what projects are rolling off and what is rolling on can really help with the knowledge of when you should send out bid packages and if you should send out an early package or just send them all at the same time. So compressed schedule, we kind of talked about that. And that's more just because you have that team atmosphere working side by side and can kind of work through things a little bit quicker. One of the most important things for me as an owner's rep, because I continue to get the calls from the owner, is efficient closeout and warranty. So again, because the CMR is on the team, they will have a greater likelihood to provide what you need to turn over the building. And it is one thing to design and build the building and then just hand the keys to a municipality and walk away. That doesn't happen. I honestly think the most work is the first 3 to 4 months that somebody is in their new building. And so it is good to have a CM that is there checking on things, continuing with their warranty list, continuing with their punch list to make sure that the client is truly happy at the end of this project. So.
Awesome. I think one of the things that I mentioned early on was that, really construction management model, whether it's agency or at risk, really lends itself very well to the vertical infrastructure. So that would be your buildings, trails, parks. It doesn't necessarily correlate, or I shouldn't say correlate, but it becomes a little bit more challenging when we're talking about roadways, bridges, highways, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants. Not to say that model can't be used for that, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, but construction manager at risk cannot be used for highways, bridges, and is it roads?
Yeah, any heavy highway, basically.
Okay,
it cannot be used
so that's specifically prohibited by Iowa law. But again, this is really built very well for those projects that are going to have multiple trades associated with it, where you're going to have, HVAC, you're going to have technology, you're going to have electrical, you're going to have plumbing, you're going to have concrete work, you're going to have steel erection. When you're really talking about bringing all of these different players together, that's really where construction management starts to really shine and really helps deliver to an owner a project that is ultimately less dollars on the construction side because you've gotten input along the way and you've made informed decisions about really what's in the best interest for the city and how does that kind of fit in with the intent of the design and construction of the building.
Yeah, and I guess just one more comment, and then we can go to questions, but we all know that the cities are busy and their staff has other jobs to do to keep developers and everybody else happy in their cities. And so having a CM is someone having a seat at the table that fully understands construction and asks the right questions and has your back throughout the entire process.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, and again, we'll move here into questions, but one of the things that I did wanted to maybe touch upon a little bit is about our funding partners out there. So we know that a lot of times, municipalities have to make up the gap in funding with either federal dollars or state dollars. And right now, we just don't know how this is going to play when federal dollars are associated with it. We do know that rural development does allow for alternative delivery systems with prior approval. We haven't heard much from the CDBG folks yet, or SRF, in terms of how construction manager at risk might play with those different funding programs. Again, this has only been new to the state of Iowa for a month now, so I think everybody's still trying to figure this out. But certainly there's more webinars to come on that. So Daniel, if you want to open up some questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I want to make sure is asked actually just got asked just now, and that is, what size projects would you typically see a construction manager at risk being utilized on?
Angie, you want to take a swing at that one?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the complexity of it, but I think honestly, anything like 3 million and above makes some sense to me.
Yeah, I think that it probably doesn't make sense for your bread and butter projects that you do every year in terms of well, I'm trying to think on a building side. I mean, certainly it doesn't make sense for maintenance type projects, repairs of your facilities, roof replacements, where it's going to be like a single trade associated with that project. This really lends itself well to where you have multiple trades coming together.
Excellent, thank you. Earlier in the call, there was a mention of contingency fees, and this question touches on that subject. If the risk of material costs and other non-owner driven changes are on the construction manager, is there any stats on how much that drives the overall project costs?
Yeah, so again, if we're talking about construction manager at risk, if there are anything that is a cost escalation that isn't an owner-driven change, that is on the risk of the construction manager and it comes out of their pocket, that doesn't get passed on to the city, right? So the way that a construction manager is going to manage that risk is they are going to create contingencies on that guaranteed maximum price. So they're going to have hard costs, maybe building square footage, but they're going to have maybe, I don't know, I'm going to just throw a crazy number out here, but they might have a 25% contingency on top of that. That is there to manage that risk of overages. And that's where we start to talk about cost savings. When the bids come in and those contingencies aren't utilized, that's where you have that cost savings.
Yeah, and from my perspective, the contingency, depending on when you set the GMP, the contingency lessens. So on my projects, we might carry a 12% contingency during schematic design. When we get to design development, it might be down to 8%. And when we're at construction drawings, it's down to 5%. So it just really depends where you set that GMP. But the owner and the CM are talking about what is an acceptable contingency and what everybody's comfortable with. So that should be talked about. And I would just say it's probably different depending on how early you set the GMP.
Yeah, I think it would also depend upon the complexity of the project as well.
For sure.
Excellent. Well, a little bit more on the timelines. When do you foresee the builder being brought on board? Is there going to be a standard throughout this process, say at 30% complete with design?
So, no, I don't think there'll be a standard. You can bring them on anytime you want to, as long as you follow the intent or the disclosure intent, the RFQ process, RFP process. So as an owner's rep, I am an advocate for bringing them on as early as possible. Because really what you're at risk for initially is just their fee, just their time. until you get everything else established. So if something would happen and you walk away, you're truly at risk for their time spent at this point. And so it's not the full contract, you know, until you get that GMP, you have some leeway on what this really, how many dollars you have to expend, I guess I should say. So depends on how big the project is, what the project is, but a lot of times in my perspective, if you can bring them on similar to when you bring on the design team, there's a lot of, I shouldn't say that. I should say after like schematic design or after, if you're space
Right.
planning, you don't need them on space planning, things like that. But soon after you know what you're building, I would bring them on.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it probably does make some sense if a community wants to build a fire station,
Mhm.
right? It probably doesn't make sense to bring a construction manager on day one.
No.
It probably makes more sense to think about how many bays
Mhm.
in our fire station do we need? Well, we have 3 trucks and we think we're gonna grow and we might need 2 more bays. Okay, we have a 5-bay fire station. And then, you know, now we have kind of created that building program, so to speak. Now it makes more sense to bring on the construction manager to help cost that and help drive decisions in terms of materials and construction means and methods from that point on.
Yeah, and everybody's 30% is different too. So that's hard to,
Yeah,
you know, everybody's 50% is different. So, but yeah, I think once you know what you're building, you know, you've gotten that far with the architect and you know what you think you're building, then it makes sense to bring them on.
Excellent. And a little bit more on the timeline. Can we use construction manager at risk for projects that have already begun, or when is the final offer on ramp to select CMAR or to use the traditional design bid build?
So I'm gonna answer this from a high level, but anything before July 1st, no.
that's a good answer.
And then after that, talk to your city attorney.
Yeah.
It's really, this is so new, it's only been since July 1st. So to me, anything that's being built, I would say no at this point, since it's only been a month.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe what that question, maybe look at it from a different perspective. Say for instance, a municipality is wanting to do a fire station.
Mhm.
When do they, in that course of the project, when do they have to decide how this project is going to be delivered? Do they need to decide early on that it's design bid build, or can they get down the process a little bit and say, hey, wait a minute, it makes a lot of sense to bring a construction manager on right now, and you know, whether that's agency or whether that's at risk. You know, when does the city have to make that decision?
That's a good question. I would say it is once they know what their project is.
Yeah.
So similar to that other answer, but I think once you decide you have a project and what it is, I think you have to choose your path, right?
Right.
You can't be going back and forth. So I think you have to choose your path at that
Right.
point.
I would say you probably have like that, and again, like you said, everybody's 30% is different, but I think it's very early on in the project where you're starting to make these decisions. I think from a municipality's perspective, I think there is a lot of benefit in setting that guaranteed maximum price, just because you know what it's going to be, and you don't have that risk of the project costs escalating out of hand, or bidding at the wrong cycle, or lumping everything together into one bid package, and now you're kind of at the mercy of how that general contractor gets their subcontracts bid to them. So I think there is a lot of value in setting that price once with your council, and then not having to come back and have those hard conversations.
Yeah, and as far as choosing a path, architects their fee will be different based on it too. So is an owner's rep fee. So I think establishing what path you're taking, the architect will need to know that so that they can give you an appropriate fee too.
Right. That doesn't mean to say that it's going
No.
to be more.
No, definitely not.
It means that from a design professional's point of view, as we come together as a team, we don't have to do as much detailed design.
Right.
We don't have to do specifications to the nth degree, because we are making these decisions together early on. And it doesn't take, we don't have to spend the same amount of time as we would if we were getting ready for a public bid.
And you may not be administering the bid packages either.
That is
could be the
correct.
CM, we're on a design bid build, you're administering, the architect administers the bid packages. So it's just it's transferring workload is all it's doing. And that's why I made the comment that the architect would like to know too.
Yep.
So,
This question is fairly technical in nature, but I do want to ask it. With a construction manager at risk, does the sales tax exemption stay with the owner who provides that sales tax form, or is that only with the construction manager?
I think that it would stay with the city. Because the city is the entity that would ultimately collect or not collect tax
Mhm.
on the work.
mhm. And I think in the bid documents, you would say that they're tax exempt or however, or they want a refund or however that looks. So I can't answer that 100%, but I know on agency, it goes back to the city. It doesn't stay with the CM at that level or with the primes either. So I would assume that with CMR, it would be the same, but it would need to be spelled out in the bid documents.
Yeah, I think, and again, at least just from my perspective, when we issue a general contract for a contractor to develop a project, they provide their list of subs and then the cities issue those tax exemption certificates. I believe it would be roughly the same process with the construction manager at risk, even though the city's just not holding those contracts.
I agree.
Okay. Obviously in Iowa, we have cities of all sizes, and this question touches on that a little bit. Preparing a request for quotations may be an issue with some smaller communities. Are there any firms or companies out there that would prepare the documents to assure that the relationship with the construction manager is mutually beneficial?
Yeah, I think so there's probably not that one group out there besides the Iowa League of Cities that would maybe offer that service and be what I would call a agnostic provider of that. But I will say that any design professional firm, any construction management firm that are interested in that would be happy to assist in that and have that candid conversations and help prepare that for a city, knowing that they're going to have to compete for the work and knowing that they still need to win on the merits that they provide.
Yeah.
To the market.
Yeah, I think the architect you hire, if you have an owner's rep, they do that sort of work all the time too. From my experience, the owner's rep has been the one that writes the RFQ and RFP and initiates the interviews and does all that. So I would, as hiring a CMAR, still take that process and be the one that's knowledgeable about all the notifications and not put that back on a city. But I think plenty of architect firms would do that. And I do think CMs would do that for a fee and not then be expected to get the work as well. So.
Sounds like the construction manager at risk process takes the surprises out of the project. Are there surprises that we aren't thinking of or have been mentioned yet that we should be aware of?
So I'll take a stab at this first. Obviously, the one thing that is always a surprise is what is in the ground, right? We don't know what might be buried on a project. And we could probably say that in a couple of different ways, but really it's the unforeseen conditions. Those are always major risks that we have to deal with. Those can be mitigated to a degree, just depending upon how much money we want to spend upfront in terms of the geotech exploration, subsurface utility engineering. Those things can be identified. Environmental risks obviously are a big thing. If there's an unknown underground storage tank, we run into some contaminated materials. Obviously, that's something that no one would have planned for. So, those would be the gotchas, right? That we all need to be aware of. I don't know from your perspective, are there gotchas in the building trades that we need to be aware of?
No, I would just tell you no day is typical on a job site. So there's a lot of surprises every day, but hopefully with a team environment, those don't get to the owner. They get solved long before they get there. So I just, you know, we all know supply chain issues, we know unforeseen conditions under the ground, but I can't think of anything else really.
What about weather?
Yeah, I mean, weather for sure, which some of that's covered in your general conditions, hopefully, so. But yeah, definitely weather. It's Iowa. It's always hard to know what's gonna be going on, but hopefully that's covered somewhere for the most part, so.
Right.
Well, we are coming up on the end of our hour. I just want to thank you, Angie and Casey, again for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I know that you would welcome any questions, and you have their contact information. Thank you up on the screen. There was a few questions we did not get to, so feel free to reach out to Angie or Casey with any questions you might have. This will not be the only presentation on Construction Manager at Risk. As you heard throughout the call, this is a new tool. There are developing understandings of how the process works. And I know that the Master Builders of Iowa will also be hosting an educational opportunity on the subject in the near future. So please reach out to Angie and Casey if you have any questions. Stay in touch with the Iowa League of Cities Membership Services Division if you have any questions on these tools and others, and look for communications from us for future educational presentations on Construction Manager at Risk and others. But thank you for your time, and we appreciate you staying with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.